Hello, and welcome to the Things That Don't Change, where we endeavor to view an ever-changing world through the lens of eternity. I am Thomas Walheim. That is Chris Hayden. Chris, say hello to the lovely people.
Hello.
So today we want to talk to you about something that we've actually talked about a couple of times off air. It's something that is kind of near and dear to my heart, and I think in some way near and dear to your heart as well, which is the art of doing things properly. Like when you hear someone say, "Oh, we want to do something properly," it kind of sounds snooty when they say that. "Oh, well, we have to do it properly." It sounds very, like Edwardian era England. As I said to you a couple days ago, we were
Yeah, I was just thinking about this.
yeah,
Go
we
ahead.
were, we were we were at Outback Steakhouse, and I said something about the Edwardian era, and I was like, it feels weird calling it an era. It was like 9 years. Like, like,
Yeah.
like,
Like Victoria was on the throne forever, so Victorian era,
right,
I get it.
right.
But the Edwardian era,
Even like the Georgian era, it's like, yeah, sure, totally.
yeah.
Like, but the Edwardian era, yeah, that dude was there for like 9 years.
For a hot minute.
Yeah. But anyway, so like you thinking of like sort of you're thinking of like
You know,
yeah, go ahead.
just to go back to that, because I just thought of something. We say that, like that, it's just 9 years why we say that, but we do the same thing. Our presidents only are for 8 years at most, and it's the Bush era, the Obama
Right.
era. So yeah, I mean, we do the same thing.
Right.
We
No,
shouldn't poke fun at
I
the
was
British for
I
that.
guess I was talking like a week ago, and I said, during the Obama administration, which was 8 years long. So
Yeah.
I guess, yeah,
That's a period of time where
it is
there
a
was a
period of
very
time.
certain way that society carried itself, or there was a certain culture, or, whatever it was. But there's something
Right.
that codifies that time in history.
There was there was an episode of Downton Abbey in which Maggie Smith's character says to, I do not remember the name of the actress who plays Isabel Crawley. She also plays uh, Harriet Jones, MP Flydell North, and later Harriet Jones Prime Minister in Doctor Who. But she always introduces herself that way, Harriet Jones Prime Minister, and everyone goes, yeah, yes, we know who you are.
What is she at the FBI? I mean, like,
So, um, so anyway, so she says something about like, oh, should we? It, I don't know. Isabel is saying something to Violet. They're the two like older ladies in the family, and she says, oh, well, should we do it the more modern way, or should we do it the classic way? And she goes, oh heavens, no! Remember, we are the Edwardians. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're the Victorians. Like, what are you talking about? Like, if anything, your granddaughters are the Edwardians. But
yeah,
yeah. Anyway, so when you hear someone say they want to do something properly, particularly if they enunciate properly, like just say like, no, let's do it properly or whatever. That's one thing. If someone says like, I want to do it properly, then it's
let's
like,
do it
okay,
properly.
yeah, you're thinking like, oh, you want to have like a fancy garden party with those floppy hats,
Yeah,
and you're thinking like they're sort of LARPing as a European aristocrat, and that's actually kind of what I want to talk about. Is that like, so like recently, you were over to my house. We had some friends over for tea and coffee, and and I was like, no, I'm going to like serve like a proper tea. And what I mean by a proper tea is like, no, I'm giving you each your own teapot and your own like teacup and saucer, and I'm gonna give you a pastry along with it so that you can enjoy that. And like, that's not even like proper afternoon tea, but it's like it's closer to it. Um,
hmm
but but the I really enjoy doing things like that. I really enjoy saying like, no, let me do it kind of like the way that it has been done. Do it the more traditional way. But you and I have talked before about how like we want to sit down to like a proper afternoon tea, you know,
hmm
like not just we are sitting with a mug of tea and enjoying some tea, which we do sometimes. We enjoy a mug of tea, but like no, we want to sit down. We want to have our pot of tea, have the teacup, the saucer, have like the like 3-tier tray with like some different pastries and things like that. And it's a whole process. It's a very different thing from sitting down to coffee, which is kind of the ideal first date because it can be as short or as long as you wish. Like, if you're there for 5 minutes and then you say, okay, well, I gotta go, you just take your coffee and go. Whereas if you're
yeah.
really enjoying the conversation, yeah, we can be here for an hour and 15 minutes. Why not? And and so that's kind of like why it's a low pressure date. Whereas sitting down to tea in a traditional sense is a like, no, there's a process to this. This is gonna take a while, and so we are committing to sitting with each other throughout this entire process. And this entire process is made so that we can continue talking with things that you can only really nibble at a time, and so it's not really interrupting the conversation. But also things to do with your hands continuously, so that you don't feel socially awkward, because you can always just sip your tea a little more or pour some more tea or take another finger sandwich or whatever it is, you know? When you talk about doing things like that, there's this tendency for people who aren't into those sort of things to look at sort of the sort of pomp and circumstance of that and go, oh, they're just trying to pretend. They're playing make believe, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like there's a very fine line. Like, in fairness, there actually is a fine line between playing make believe and trying to revive an old tradition. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, like maybe not tradition necessarily, but like, yeah, I mean, there's a fine line between like, say, acting something, but the same and performing something.
Right.
You know, and again, we use those words interchangeably, so I'm not trying to necessarily say that they're always different. But like
And
I
performance isn't
remember,
necessarily bad either.
right? Like I remember when Bishop Barron was talking to Shia LaBeouf, you know, when he was starting to come into the church and he was interested in that, and
Right.
Shia LaBeouf was talking about the Latin Mass and how interesting he found it. And one of the things they were talking about is how it's kind of a play in many ways. Now, that's not to say that they're pretending or it's fake or anything like that, but the different traditions and the, you know, you do this, or when you step down from the sanctuary, you go around the priest this way and come back up the other side, and like all this different choreographed way that things happen. There's a certain, you know, gravitas is the word, but there's a certain performance
Decorum.
to that. Yeah, and that's not acting in like a oh, I'm just kind of playing a part. There's, I mean, you're playing a part, but again, it's not like a make believe thing. There's a,
Right.
yeah, I guess a very fine line there.
Right.
Yeah,
Because like people will say like they'll go to a more ritualistic liturgy, um,
yeah,
and they'll say, oh well, that's just performative. And it's like you're halfway there. You're halfway correct, because it is performative. Where you get it wrong is you say just performative.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, this is performative, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. In the same way that that you go before the king or queen, and you curtsy if you're a lady, or you bow if you're a man, and you address them by a certain title. It's like that is a performance, but it's a performance to encourage in your mind, in your psychology, and the psychology of those around you, to encourage a specific idea that you actually hold to be true. You
right.
know?
Yeah, I mean,
It's,
like,
a,
or
it's like
like
this is a performance to instill a sense of importance of this person.
right.
And
I mean, we were talking a couple weeks ago. I think I mentioned on the podcast about like the Parliament when I visited Parliament when I was in
yeah,
England, and just going through the tradition of, you know, how the state opening happens and the processions and all that stuff, and the interplay between the Crown and the Parliament, the House of
yeah,
Commons, and just to keep that in mind of this is where we stand as a government, and these are our roles, and you know, it just kind of puts that idea in your head that yes, this is how this is going to play out,
right.
and if you don't,
Which
we're going to cut your head off.
which is a really funny thing, honestly. Like, because there is something to, as we said in that episode, making those rituals that instill those certain ideas. But you had to wonder, like, how long after Charles the First did they make that tradition? Like, because if you're
Yeah.
gonna have the tradition of you know, there's the procession going into Parliament, and then they shut the door on the representatives of the king, and they had to like rap on the door and ask to be admitted in. It's like how long after beheading Charles the First did they think it was proper to do that? Because like Charles the Second, his son, they really did do a lot
Yeah.
of hey, remember how we killed your dad? Could we just pretend that didn't happen? And Charles the Second was like, sure. so
Yeah.
so like, how long do you take between those 2 points where you go like, all right, yeah, we did just behead the king, and we're trying to kind of pretend that didn't happen for a bit, but also we're going to change the opening to Parliament because we want to instill a sense of like, hey, don't forget we can behead you too.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to remember if that was like something that came sooner, or if that took after the Stuarts were kind of gone, now we got
Right.
the House of Hanover or whatever. Who are the Georgians? Were they Hanover?
I think they were Hanover.
Yeah. So whichever royal house that was.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting though, just to be in Parliament because and see all the frescoes and stuff there because a lot of frescoes of like the different events in English history, and it's like
Yeah.
Charles II escaping from the whatever the parliamentarians, whatever they called the other side in the Civil
Yeah.
War, and it's like this romantic story of him escaping, and some young village girl kind of helped hide him and try to get the soldiers to go the other way while he escaped in like in disguise on a horse or something. So it's
Right.
like, yeah, why was he escaping? It was the people in the South, right?
Right. The who needs the story of Joshua when you have the
Yeah.
story of Charles II? The
I mean, again, I don't mean to poo-poo it. Like, it's cool to have that, like,
No, it
as
is.
a,
It
like a
is.
national history. Like
Yeah.
one of the other ones they have is um, Sir Thomas More and Cardinal Wolsey arguing in the Houses of Parliament,
Right.
which I thought was really cool because I'm like, hey, that's our guy, Thomas
Yeah.
More.
Another
But
guy
again,
that you
it
guys
was
beheaded, but
yeah, but this is pre-beheading, when he was still kind of in the early stages of arguing for the king getting a divorce, so they weren't quite on the odds yet. But it's like,
Right.
yeah, no, it was their guy too for a bit until he
Right,
was
until he
beheaded. But
suddenly
it's
wasn't.
still part of their national story.
Yeah, and honestly, I tend to take a couple of friendly digs at our Protestant brothers and sisters, and I think if anyone, you can take a dig at the Anglicans, but but I also tend to take a dig at the English just because they're an easy target. Apologies, but I will say to their credit, both the Anglican Church and England. I will say to their credit, they've done a good job of somewhat acknowledging that, yeah, sorry about Thomas More. like,
Yeah,
in the wake of that, as things kind of settled down after like the Elizabethan era and everything, like you get past that and they sort of go, yeah, that was a rough time. That was not correct. Like, so I would do want to say to their credit, like as much as it's easy to like kind of take a dig at them, no, they have kind of acknowledged and repented of, yeah, no, we really shouldn't have beheaded Thomas More. That was our bad.
yeah. I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was I saw a meme or something like the Church of England's Facebook page posted like on the feast of St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher, just like, hey, remember all Reformation martyrs, including St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher, and it's like. Why? Wait, where were they martyrs though? Like,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's like, yeah, no, like I appreciate you, recognizing even our people.
Yeah.
Because we both killed the other side.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be just ransacking. That's killing. But just you shouldn't just be like wholesale murdering, people who
Right.
disagree with you. That's never a good way to kind of get your
I know, I
get your
don't.
truth to. Yeah. No.
Yeah. So going back a little bit in the conversation, this is I'm going to sort of tie historicity as we're talking about it into the idea of properness, like doing things properly. So are you familiar with the sword breaker, that like dagger that like had a bunch of serrations in it to like catch a sword and try to like
Yeah.
break it? Okay, so this is a weapon that we've only found a few of on historical battlefields that they call the sword breaker, because essentially, like, think of like a sort of K-bar knife. It kind of looks like that, except that the serrations are like most of the way through the blade. Like, these things are really deep because they are meant to catch a sword mid-swing and kind of lock it in so that you can break the sword. And people obsess over this thing, and they say, why do we not see more of these? This is such a perfect idea. This is so cool, because if you're imagining yourself as some sort of like medieval John Wick, then like this is gonna be a really cool scene, just breaking swords left and right. And the answer by archaeologists and anthropologists and historians is, hey, you know why we don't find a bunch of them? The general rule is if you don't find a lot of something, it didn't work. Like,
Yeah.
it was impractical. Like, either in a sense of it didn't work, in a sense of it actually didn't function, or it just wasn't worth the resources for the little bit of payout that you got. And so, why do we not see more sword breakers? Because most people weren't medieval John Wicks. Like, what were you gonna do? You're gonna say like, all right, I'm gonna focus all of my energy into trying to catch that sword at just the right moment, and then like lock it in so I can smash it with something else, and then haha, and then oh no, that guy just Isildur'd me with a broken sword, and now I'm dead.
Right.
Like, it's like that doesn't actually do anything. He just
You
has a
just create
shorter,
a
more
smaller
jagged sword. Like, so
Congratulations.
and so that is, in essence, what the idea of tradition is. Tradition is the summary of everything that has worked up to this point. And I say that both in terms of sacred tradition, which we hold not only dear, but we hold to be infallible and an authority of how we ought to live our lives and view the world, but also in a sense of lowercase traditions. We do things that work, and we only keep doing things if they continually work. Like, particularly the older a tradition is, you see like you see some things that just are continually devolving. Like, yeah, I guess I'm going to go after the Anglicans one more time. But the Anglican tradition right now is really fading. Like
Yeah.
they recently announced that the Archbishop of Canterbury, or as they would fashion her, the Archbishop of Canterbury, for the first time is a woman. They've had female bishops before, but they've never had that particular see filled by a woman, which is kind of like, Anglicans don't really like the word primacy, but that's kind of like their episcopal primate.
I mean, he is the primate of all England, so.
Right. And
And
so,
then there's York, which
right,
is also a thing.
which is also important somehow.
Yeah.
It's like it's sort of a little second Rome.
Right. It's like Constantinople, but
Yeah.
back in the day.
It's
Yeah, no,
the
we're kind of cool too,
It
right?
is the Constantinople of Protestantism. So, in any case, like, so this isn't an episode to talk about that current event, but it is just sort of illustrative of the issue that we're talking about, which is Anglicanism has continually kind of departed from tradition and kind of made their own thing, and early on much less so, but even in the early stages, like there was the Book of Common Prayer that was promulgated, I believe, under Henry VIII, if I remember correctly, and then it was revised by his son, and then it was revised again by Elizabeth, and like it just, they keep going, no, let's do away with more of that, because things started devolving very quickly into clans, into a sort
Yeah.
of religious
I
gang
mean,
war.
that's
Like,
why the Civil War happened, was because
Right.
the king was starting to be a little too tradition-y,
Right.
and they didn't really like
Right.
that.
Right. The King Charles the First was starting to espouse more, high church chant and a little more ritualistic liturgy and everything, and he was still Anglican, but that felt a little too Catholic to a lot
Yeah.
of the Puritans at the time, and so they were like, nope, can't have that, and so. But anyway, in any case, the Anglicans throughout their early history just kept saying, no, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that, when it came to sacred traditions and even just lowercase t traditions that had been a part of the church for a long time. And did that work for the first 100 years? Depends on what you mean by work, but let's just say yes. Like, yeah, it was working somewhat well, but fast forward a few 100 years, and wow, all the pews are just empty, and if you ask anybody what does the Anglican Church teach on blank within an Anglican church, I don't really know. I believe this, you know, like,
Yeah. And I mean,
is,
just in
God,
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, just like in, I guess, in more broad terms, I mean, religions become like the rock concert kind of megachurch auditorium type thing,
right,
which, yeah, I mean, again, you're treating it with that less, I guess, reverence or importance, and that tends to
yeah,
make it feel just more, oh yeah, just like I'm going to a concert. But again, that removes something from what
right,
you're doing, like in your mind, if anything, which again we kind of talked about a couple weeks ago.
right. So like you took it. So I'll take a break from picking on the Anglicans and pick on the non-denominationals. That's like non-denominational Protestantism. Back in our parents' age, The irony of non-denominational Protestantism is that it is always, throughout its history, essentially a copy of a Protestant denomination, just without the formal affiliation of that Protestant denomination. So, in our generation, a non-denominational Protestant is functionally Baptist. Like, both their approach to theology and their worship tends to be styled after the Baptist church, right? Whereas for our parents' age, it's really functionally Pentecostal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was just sort of oh, well, this is what's fashionable right now in Christianity. That very vibrant, lively, shaking with exuberance in the Holy Spirit sort of Christianity, speaking in tongues, the gifts of the Holy Spirit being bestowed upon you in every Sunday service, people prophesying. It was like, that was what was big at the time. And after a while, that started to kind of fade, wane in popularity, and the Baptists had their day again. You know? Like,
Yeah.
oh, well, now we're getting into the idea of, like, the sort of Bible-thumping, like, passionate, like, great, like, emotionally swelling music, and essentially, like, this big concert, and then, hey, I want everybody to you know, like, everyone bow your heads, close your eyes, and I just want you to raise your hand if you want to accept Jesus into your heart. And if you want to accept Jesus into your heart, one of our team members is going to come talk to you afterwards. And they profess the idea of, well, baptism is just an outward expression of an inward truth, which is a very Baptist idea. Like, it's always one of the great ironies of the Baptist denomination that they call themselves Baptists when they believe in baptism the least of any denomination.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, that's what happens when tradition is kind of just well, if it's no longer fashionable, if it's no longer cool, you know? Like, once you start removing things that have worked up to that point, eventually what you're left with is something that doesn't work, something that you've invented, something that is entirely new and experimental, and that's why Anglicanism is fading. That's why the Pentecostalism started fading after, like, the 80s. Like, the more you remove yourself from the summary of everything that has worked up to this point, the more you are bound to eventually get to a point of, oh, and none of this works anymore, because it's like if you're trying to make a clock, but you said, like, but I don't want to do gears, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I want to do a new clock. Clocks have been perfected to such a, like, ridiculous degree that anything added or changed on a clockwork is called a complication. Like,
Yeah, I mean, why reinvent the wheel, right? I
right,
mean, like
exactly.
that, and a lot of this is just kind of like the revolutionary spirit that's so ingrained in us as a culture for the past like 100,
Yeah,
150 years, where yes, we need to remake everything anew. And there's some utility to that, you know, if like maybe the society you're in isn't just like a, say, quote, conservative society, but like actively just kind of not like rejecting everything that might even be a good thing, or just like um, what's the word? There's a specific word I'm looking for, like a reactionary society, which is not just a, hey, we need to conserve the past, but like we need to actively move back to a very specific time and try to run
yeah,
things like that. It's like time, like history doesn't quite work like that. Like we can't, like, it wouldn't be the traditional thing to do to say, all right, we're gonna live as if we're in um, I don't know, like 12th century Byzantium. Like,
right,
no, 12th century Byzantium is past. You know, like we
right.
can take maybe the practice of religion or like different things from that were good and try to transplant them into the way we are today, but we can't just go back in time.
And
We don't have a time machine.
that's the tricky thing about it is at what point is it not a development tradition? At what point is it we are trying to resuscitate something that has since died?
Yeah.
Like, because this is the problem that you have with the Western Orthodox, within Orthodoxy. Um, Now, I'm going to say from a Catholic perspective, I'm not saying this is like, oh, this is the teaching of the church, but just no, from the perspective of a Catholic, um, the Western Orthodox and the Eastern Orthodox are in the exact same boat in my mind. They are people who are not in union with Rome and yet have valid sacraments, and so
Yeah.
they're in the same exact boat in my mind. Like, but within Orthodoxy, there's this tricky situation when it comes to the Western Orthodox. The Western Orthodox have something that is functionally kind of like a TLM. It is almost in a sense a Tridentine Mass in the most pure sense. It's like, no, this is the Mass around the Council of Trent, right? No developments since then, because we do develop our traditions. When you go to a TLM, that's not like, oh, this is the Mass as it was prayed in the catacombs. It's like, no, this retains the core of the Masses in the catacombs. If you read Justin Martyr, he talks very clearly about the idea of so we had the readings of Scripture, and then we had the Kiss of Peace, and then we had a collection for the poor, and then we worshiped the Eucharist. It's like, yeah, no, this is the Mass. He's describing the Mass. So it's like it takes that first century idea, but then centuries since have happened, and now we're adding things. There's a canon of the saints, which was not formalized in the first century, because who would we be talking about? We talk about.
There's a reason why the Roman canon, all the saints mentioned, are like the early martyrs
Right.
of Rome, because those are the ones who were around back then when the canon became a thing.
Right. You're going to talk about the apostles. You're going to talk about Stephen. You're going to talk about Marcellinus. You're going to talk about you're going to talk about the people that we can point to them in the early scriptures, because the early scriptures and the early liturgies are both talking about the same guys who just died,
Right.
And so we do have developments since then. What the Western Orthodox Church is these guys who went to, I don't remember which see they went to. They went to some patriarch in the Orthodox Church, and they said it was probably Moscow.
I was gonna say, I think it's Moscow.
Moscow just makes churches sometimes.
Just whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can come to Moscow.
So I say Moscow because Moscow there's also a conundrum of is the Orthodox Church of America, which is under Moscow, a valid Orthodox church, is also a big question in Orthodoxy right now. We don't know. Because Moscow just makes churches sometimes. And so, in any case, the Western Orthodox Church went to, I'm going to say Moscow, I'm pretty sure it is, but for the sake of this conversation it is, they went to some patriarch. They went to the Patriarch of Moscow, and they said, hey, we want to make a church which is functionally Western. It has the Western liturgy. The liturgy will be in Latin, but we want it to be in line with the Orthodox Church. And Moscow said, sure. And so they started making this thing, and they started performing this liturgy that hasn't existed for 500 years.
Yeah.
And so that is a problem to many Orthodox, because a lot of Orthodoxy is continual tradition. It is the development of tradition through is the preservation of tradition as it has come to you, being handed down by your fathers. Whereas the Western Orthodox, it's not the preservation of a tradition, it's the resuscitation of a tradition that has since gone away within Orthodoxy. And so that puts it in kind of a weird place liturgically, because if you're going to look for, okay, I want the liturgy as it was done in 1500, but you're trying to preserve the tradition handed down by the fathers, you know what you end up with? Catholicism.
Right.
It's like that's what it is. It's like, yeah, if you're trying to take the Western liturgy and say, but we want to preserve the continual tradition handed down from father to son over the centuries, yeah, that's called Catholicism, baby.
Yeah. It's the liturgy of the Patriarch of Rome, of the West. I mean,
this is literally 100% Roman Catholicism. You just want to do an older version of it and cut off the development
the
of
Pope
tradition.
part.
Yeah, you're cutting off the Pope part, and you're cutting off the development that has happened since then.
Yeah. So like, where does that? So okay. So what do you do with that then? Like, how? What am I trying to say? Like, I mean, I guess there's always the problem. At some point, a tradition has to start.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it's not just like if something is in. I don't even know if this is on topic. Um, but um, but yeah. So on one point, it's like, where does that start?
Hmm.
Like, if we just start doing something now, that yeah, it might be a novelty, but in 500 years, that's a tradition.
Right.
So like people complain about the Novus Ordo. Sure, plenty of problems with it. Like I got no problem saying, criticisms, whatever. But in 500 years, that'll just be a traditional mass
Right.
if it's still around, right? I mean, so
Right.
so there's that.
I can only speculate. I don't have any sources on this, but like I wouldn't be surprised if in 1570 when the Missale Romanum was promulgated as the official missal of the Roman Catholic Church, and they started doing away with a bunch of the newer liturgies that were less than 200 years old, and some of the older liturgies that just sort of fizzled out. I'm sure there were a lot of people who were like, "Oh, well, now we have to do this new thing."
Yeah,
It wasn't new; it was just new to them. Like
right.
um, it was a codified missal of this is what we do in Rome.
Yeah,
But
and again,
yeah,
that's not necessarily one to one with the Novus Ordo because yeah, that's kind of a new thing that was started in a specific
right.
time. It's obviously similar to the old thing and still taking a lot
But
of the same
it
paces,
is met with
but
a similar
a new liturgy.
emotionality.
Yeah, but at the same time, like at some point, the Divine Liturgy of Saint John Chrysostom was created by Saint John
Right.
Chrysostom.
Yeah.
It was new at that point,
Right.
right? I mean, the Roman liturgy started in the what fourth century or something like that,
Hmm.
based off of earlier liturgies. But again, as we began to know it, it came from that, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's a tricky thing because like there are three basic boats when it comes to doing things properly or doing things traditionally, which functionally, spoiler alert, are the same thing. Like so when someone talks about doing something properly, what they really mean is doing something the way that we have proven works, you know, and
Yeah.
and so and not just works, but most properly enhances the experience. Um, and so like if you I'm gonna bring up bowing to the monarch one more time just because it's that's like a small ritual that like people recognize. It's like yeah, you go before a monarch and you bow or curtsy before them, particularly if you are their subject. um,
Hmm.
and and so it's a like yeah, you go before the monarch, you bow, you curtsy, and you give them a specific address. You say, "Your Royal Highness" or "Your Majesty," depending on what country it is, depending on what their tradition is. Um, and yet, if you just say, "I'm going to go before them and I'm going to shake their hand," and they might actually be fine with that. They might be fine with just shaking hands. And it's like, yeah, it'll work. It'll work fine. But what most properly enhances the things that we are trying to enshrine is doing it properly, which is the bowing, the curtsying, the formal address. We're trying to enshrine that the idea that no, this person is important and has authority, right? So when it comes to tradition or doing things properly, you have three boats. You have it has to start somewhere, and then once it starts to fizzle out, you have the revitalization of no, let's return to doing things properly, and then you have you're trying to resuscitate a cadaver. Like at some
Hmm.
point, this stopped happening, like,
Hmm.
and so it's a tricky thing because um, yeah, like when you think of like the proper afternoon tea, going back to our original analogy, that's not something that you and I grew up doing.
Right.
It's something that we've studied or heard of from different historical sources. We see it in different movies and we go, that seems nice. And so we start it. And it's like, that is doing it properly in one sense, but it's not traditional to us because it is in a sense an old ritual that is becoming a new tradition, you know?
Hmm.
Like, because my daughter is going to grow up with, oh yeah, my dad always used to do this. So it's going to be traditional to her. So like, I'll give you an example from my own life, which is St. Nicholas Day. So my dad grew up with the German tradition of St. Nicholas Day, the idea of you leave your boots out, and then on the 6th of December, St. Nicholas comes
Comes and
around.
throws a giant thing of money through your window,
Right,
and
and
so you can
and
pay
uh, and
dowry
pays for
for
the
your
dowry
daughters.
for the three women so they
Yeah,
don't get sold as prostitutes. Yeah,
exactly.
so um, and then you go out into town and you look for the heretic and you just get your brass knuckles and so. But anyway, he grew up with the German tradition of St. Nicholas Day, where you leave your boots outside, and when you come back, St. Nicholas has left some little goodies in your boots, right? And that is not something that he passed on to me, and I don't fault him for that. Like it's there are probably plenty of things that I did with my family that I am not going to be doing with my daughter just because I'm not thinking of them. You know,
Hmm.
it's not something that is forefront of my mind, and with my family, we like my wife, my kid. It's like we have our own traditions that are starting up. You know, tradition is just the summary of what worked, but also in a simpler sense, it is just a sense of what we have done, you know? And so there might be some things that I'm not even thinking of as a tradition, but Kiara will. Like, like Jess and I are just thinking, oh yeah, this is what we do. Like, um, every night when we're going to bed, we'll list some intentions, we'll pray a Hail Mary, and then I'll give her and Kiara a blessing. And that's just something that we do. That's just a good end to the night. But Kiara might grow up and think, oh, well, that's traditional. You know,
Hmm.
this is doing things properly because it's just what she's done. And it works.
Yeah.
Um, but when it comes to St. Nicholas Day, I might do that with my kids. But that's not oh, this was handed down to me by my father. It's no, I actually kind of skipped a generation. You know? But I also, there's nothing to keep me from doing it. Like, it's still alive somewhere. Like,
Right.
it's
You
still a thing
wouldn't
that
be
people do. And even
reviving
if it isn't something
something
that
that.
people
Yeah.
do, even if it isn't something that people are doing somewhere, well, if I can just say, well, I just think it's nice, so I'm going to do it, you know? Like,
Hmm.
then my revitalization isn't trying to claim that I am the continuation of my ancestors before me. It's saying, I think this is just a nice thing, so I'm taking it. This is mine
Right.
now, you know? And I think that's where we end up falling with a lot of these things that you and I grew up in a generation, as did our parents, as did their parents before them, a generation that really was kind of traditionless in many ways, at least compared to
Yeah.
other generations. Um, like we tend to historically we tend to think of Americans as having revolution baked into their blood because we kicked off the British crown, but so did everybody else.
Yeah.
Like like everybody used to be British and then they weren't. Like so
Unless they're part of the Commonwealth, then they want to kind of be half and half. But yeah.
right. But it's like yeah, we think of revolution being baked into our blood and we say like, oh, it's such an American idea. And it's like, I don't know, man, the English talk about the glorious revolution. That's
Yeah.
if referring to your revolution as the glorious revolution isn't idolizing your revolution, I don't know what is. Like and then for the Irish, they'll be like they'll always be talking about like the Troubles. They'll be talking about the problems they had in Northern Ireland of like, okay, well, are you a loyalist or are you Irish?
Right.
And it's like there are these things that are just baked into our blood as generations. Like that can be handed down many different ways. Um, but it's like that heritage can come from kind of wherever. But if you're just a random person, let's say you're not Irish, let's say you're not American, let's say you're not Indian, let's say you're not wherever else that was previously a territory of the British Crown, um, then you're just like reading history books,
Yeah.
and you go, dang, the British were really like taking over everything and just taking everything back to the British Museum and being like, this is ours now. Um, it's like if you develop the idea in your own study of like, dang, I don't really think I trust the British historically. That's not something that's been handed down to you by your fathers. If you're just like some random guy from Vietnam, you know.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's not a valid idea. Like, sure, go for it, whatever. That being said, this is gonna be okay. Apparently, this is just the episode where I actually defend the British, which I don't like.
We had to have at least one at some point.
Yeah, we had to have at least one because I've had plenty where I'm not at all. So, doing quite the opposite, really.
We're going to title this Tommy Defends the British.
Yeah, Tommy Defends the British.
I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah. All of my Irish friends will love that.
Oh, yeah.
So, anyway. So, this is going into a complete, like, side area. This is a tricky topic, but I think it's one that has to be addressed. I feel like we often forget that colonization, by and large, was a good thing. You know? Like,
yeah.
Like, did it have some bad things that came along with it? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Like, because whenever you're dealing with the subjugation of a people whose ways of life are different than yours, you're going to have some bad things happen, you know?
Right. But, like, you know, Cortez ending human sacrifice with the Aztecs, I'm not so upset about that, honestly.
Right. The British ending the tradition of sati, wife burning, in India. Great. Good for you. Because here's the thing. Like, spoiler alert, all throughout history, the idea of, like, people always treat it as historically like, oh, well, these were just empires and they just wanted lands, and they justified it by saying, oh, well, we're flying under the banner of Christ, and they forced the people to be Christian. And listen, in some instances, yeah, probably, like this is probably done against people's will, which is wrong. You shouldn't do that. Yeah, it's like catechetically, you're not supposed to do that. It's actually, baptism isn't binding if the person is not willing. But the only way, historically, that we have had congruent, peaceful, flourishing societies is through Christianity. Like, over the last 2,000 years, by and large, that's really it. Like, lasting peace for a long-term, congruent society for a long term, it was Christianity was introduced. How was Christianity introduced to people who didn't know it? Through colonization. Like, through other means, certainly. Like, you had the apostles going out into all the different lands and preaching to the peoples of Asia Minor and Greece and Rome and all throughout the empire. But it's like, yeah, colonization was just saying, like I said, there were some bad things that came with it, but we forget about the good things that came with it a lot of the time. That colonization, by and large, was saying, we are coming to this new land, and we're showing them something that we have found works better.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's a good way to put it.
Like, we're coming to this new land, and, like, people say, like, oh, well, the British, the French, the Dutch. People always forget that the Dutch colonized everything. Like,
they did colonize a lot.
The Dutch were super active in colonization. People just think of them as like, oh, well, there's those peaceful, depressed people who smoke marijuana. Like,
who were in New York for a hot minute and then they got kicked out.
But yeah, the Dutch super into colonization, and so like the French, the Dutch, the British, whatever it is, the Spanish. It's like, people think of it as when they came and they imposed their traditions, they imposed their way of life, and it's like, and hear me out on this. Okay, I'm going to use an unhelpfully broad term when I say the Native Americans, because the Native Americans were not one people. Like, they were many peoples. And some of them got along, and some of them really didn't get along, and some of them were nomadic, and some of them were set in one place. One of the issues that you run into when you talk about the idea of land acknowledgement and we are on this person's land and we should give it back to the natives. It's like, which natives? Because at one point this belonged to this tribe, and then they were conquered by this tribe. And then they left because they were nomadic, and then this tribe took over.
It's like going to Europe and saying we need to give the European land back. It's like, to who? The Romans?
Who? Yeah, like
the barbarian tribe. Which barbarian tribe? You know, like the Franks, the Gaul.
It's like if you look at just England,
Yeah.
It's like, oh well, we need England to just be people who have a real ancestry here, and so all the French and Germans come in and they go, oh well, you said so. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
You had the Celts, the Britons, the
right,
Anglo-Saxons, the Saxons,
right, and
the
so like
Vikings were there for a bit.
yeah, but it's like we view it as a like they imposed their way of life. Do you have any idea how many Native American tribes, when they encountered the gun for the first time, were like, whoa, I gotta get me one of those?
Yeah.
It's not like they were like, I'd really prefer to hunt with a bow and arrow,
Right.
but
Horses? I mean,
right,
doesn't get more like Native American on the prairie than horses, and that was
right,
brought by the Spanish.
right. And so it's like, it's not like they were going, I'd really prefer to keep hunting with a spear, but, but, the Europeans have forced firearms on me, and now I
Yeah.
have to hunt more efficiently. It's like, yeah, no, like horses and rifles were a big step up.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of what colonization was saying we're going to go into these foreign lands that seem by our modern standards to be underdeveloped. And we're going to say, hey, here's something that we find works better. And
Yeah.
does that mean that you are in some ways kind of stamping down the land saying, oh, well, we know better, so we're going to be in charge? Yeah, sure. Like, and that does come with its fair share of misadventures and vices, But there are some good things with colonization that I feel kind of get underemphasized a lot of the time.
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned the Aztecs and the human sacrifice. Like, we think that Cortez just showed up with the full might of the Spanish crown to smash them into submission. Cortez showed up with a fair amount of men, but not a large amount of men by
Yeah.
any means, against a much larger empire. And all of the people around the Aztecs, all the natives around the Aztecs who had been oppressed by the Aztecs for generations now, and their people were taken to be the human sacrifices, were like, hey, we hate these guys. We'll help you destroy them.
Right.
I mean, like, yeah, most of the force of that came from the other tribes who were upset with the Aztecs for, sacrificing their
Right.
men, women, and children for generations.
No, absolutely. And also, you gotta look at it like through. We were talking about this a little while ago. The idea of you need to view history through the lens of those who went through it, rather than through the
Yeah.
lens of modernity. And just imagine for a second, you are part of the Aztec Empire. Like you're not high up in the ranks. Like you're just a random serving class Aztec. Like you might be the next in line to be a human sacrifice, right? So, so also, just for perspective, because I feel like people, when we talk about like the Aztec Empire, people think of like the ancient Aztecs. Let's just take a moment to remember that Oxford University is older than the Aztecs.
It's
Like,
true. Yeah.
No, this is not like a oh, this is back in the days of like ancient Sparta. Like
Yeah.
no, this is relatively modern in the
Right. It's like when you talk about like feudal Japan. It's like feudal Japan was like 1400.
yeah.
It's like the age of exploration for Europeans.
Yeah. So in any case, so imagine you're an Aztec and your technology is mainly stone and a few crude metals. You have this religious system that the religious officials have a lot of authority over your life and how you are to live, even to the point that they can decide that your life is over and they are going to sacrifice you to the gods for whatever it is that they are wanting to encourage or get from the gods, and this is just part of the way of life. And then Cortez and his men show up, and from your perspective, they just look like Iron Man.
Yeah.
These guys in shining armor that like armor the likes of which you've never seen before, and you're like, what is even going on? And someone might like throw a rock at them as like a first line of defense, and it just goes gung, and falls off, and they just keep walking, and you're
Yeah.
like, whoa, something's going on here. Like it's like that scene in the first Iron Man where he's like in like Afghanistan or whatever, and he's just like tearing through this like Al Qaeda like a company or whatever, and it's like from the perspective of the average Aztec, your life kind of sucks. Like your life is just the worst. Like compared to your historical contemporaries. Like
Yeah.
if you compare, granted, things in Europe at the time weren't great all over, but yeah, compare the Aztec to the average Italian at the time. The average Italian had a better life, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, they're in the height of the Italian Renaissance. I
Yeah,
mean, all the cities were at war, yes, and there's a lot of that. But it was also the arts and the
right.
great
And
buildings,
since when
and
is war a
they had
new
a
thing? It's not like oh that
right,
just
yeah.
started. Like
Italy in war has been very
you know
familiar
who
to
else
them.
was at war?
Ever since-
The Aztecs. Like,
yeah,
and so, and so and so yeah, like as an average Aztec, your life sucks. You get a bad scrape, you die. Like you anger the high priest because you didn't bow low enough or whatever. I don't know. I don't know a lot about the Aztec religion, but it's like you anger the wrong person. Okay, well you're next in line for the chopping block. You're going to be the next human sacrifice. And then these guys come in, and they have this like gleaming armor, and they say, "We are here to introduce a system in which all life is sacred, and
yeah,
you are actually all sons and daughters of the Most High God, higher than the God that you are sacrificing to, higher than the gods that your neighbors and enemies sacrifice to. You are all children of the Most High God, and Jesus Christ came to die for you so that you could experience paradise with Him eternally, for time unending." And you're going, huh, well, there's this guy.
yeah.
Or
Those guys.
or there's High Priest Execheatle that wants to kill me and my family so that we can get some rain. Like,
Yeah.
who
Is it
am I
Cortez
gonna go with? Like,
or High Priest Don Cheadle, man? I mean, like, But yeah, no, I mean, like that's a good point. Like, yeah, and then within a generation after the Aztec Empire falls, you have Guadalupe,
right,
which is this miracle which seems to confirm what these crazy people came to tell you,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh no, wait, it's actually true.
right, which poetically is right around the Protestant Reformation. We just lost so many
Yeah,
sacramental Christians. We just lost so many people to the from the church, and then God in His wisdom, and Our Lady in her wisdom, just say, "Don't worry, I got you," and they just bump those numbers back up by saying, "Oh, all of Latin America, done." Like,
yep,
the but yeah, it's just I feel like because of colonization and our negative view of colonization.
Well, I mean, I think it is fair to say that like the whole slave trade thing
No,
was
certainly.
a big part of
There are
colonization
some
and
very
was very
terrible
bad.
things that happened
Yeah.
around colonization. I'm not trying to dismiss that at
Right.
all. Like, I don't want to diminish, like, speaking of someone's virtue does not in any way negate their vice. It's just
Right.
acknowledging a virtue. So, like, if you were to say about me, that well, that feels weirdly self-serving. If I were to say about you, if I were to say about you, he's very knowledgeable. He's very well spoken. That is speaking to your virtue. If I were to say, as I'm like giving some sort of toast at some sort of event, and I say those things, yeah, I'm not saying that you're sinless. If I were to say he is a paragon of virtuous living, and someone that you have hurt in the past is like just in the corner, like, oh yeah, well he did that thing back in high school, like,
Yeah,
it's
which
like,
which we love to do
right,
as people.
right.
We
That's
love
just
to do
kind of
that.
human nature, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, speaking of the virtue of a time or a people doesn't necessarily mean that they were sinless. Like complimenting the saints even doesn't mean that they were sinless. Doesn't mean that they
Right.
didn't do things that were wrong. It just means that, by and large, they did a good job at living a life for God,
Right.
you know? And so, like, yeah, like the slave trade, the African slave trade, absolutely terrible, and was formally denounced by the church. I will repeat again,
Multiple
because,
times.
yeah, multiple times. I will say again that some of the only slaves that were returned to their homelands in Africa were the ones that were the Spanish slave traders that were told, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, you're Spanish, which means this is the Pope's territory, baby. And if you don't return these people to their land, you're all excommunicated, and your masters are excommunicated." And all the slave trading companies went, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! We don't want to lose the good graces of the Pope." And so,
Yeah.
yeah, they returned those people to their native lands. Like, the Catholic Church was always very outspoken on this, but unfortunately, the Catholic Church wasn't really running that. Those were mostly Protestant nations, not entirely, but a lot of the time. But yeah, it's like you had some very, very terrible things that happened during colonization, but because we've forgotten the positive aspects of colonization,
Right.
I think that has made tradition kind of a dirty word in people's minds, because the idea of bringing someone into this old tried and true thing, um, of oh, well, it's our job to spread Christianity throughout the world, to baptize all nations in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's like that idea, because we have such a bad idea of colonization, it sounds domineering to many people. It sounds like you're encroaching on their rights. And it's like,
Right.
no, I'm not trying to make you do anything against your will. In fact, I can't make you do anything against your will. I'm just saying, I found something that really works. Something that will help you to live a truly flourishing life. And I just want to share it with you. I want to invite you into it. And
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
say no, then I'm going to go, darn, and I'm going to move on. But,
Yeah. I was in a conversation a couple weeks ago, and with somebody who's not necessarily like a practicing religious person, and they were asking the question as to why Europeans were so great, and to my great shame, I didn't probably go where I should have gone, which is, well, because Christianity really kind of
right,
like really kind of gets that going. Like
right.
when you have a society structured the way Christian society is structured, that works.
Yeah,
Again, not to say it doesn't have its problems, as we said, but because we all have our problems. But again, that's just the right way to run things, and that just is very conducive for a great society. Like I was reading something about like ancient Rome or whatever, and like just reading about like, oh, one guy's kind of not in the emperor's good graces and he kind of wants to get back in them. So he takes an army and marches to the capital. And just thinking about that nowadays, like if I had an issue with the U.S. government, I couldn't just march on Washington and demand
right.
that they change their
That
ways.
would really do much the opposite.
Yeah. But in Rome, yeah, you have the bigger army. What's the emperor going to do? I mean, you
Right.
have the force, so he's kind of has to kind of go with that. And it was just kind of a might makes right thing. Christianity comes along, and suddenly now there's a very specific way that society should be structured where that becomes less of a thing.
Yeah.
Like, obviously it still happens with kings and stuff, but like, we're at the point nowadays where, yeah, you can't just say, well, I'm stronger than you, so I'm going to, try to force my will upon you. People
Yeah.
do, but that's not the right way to do things. And we kind of have an inkling of that in our head from the fact that we were raised in this Christian culture that says,
Right.
no, we have, the society structured a certain way. You have the people who are in charge and, the rest of us, I guess. But, there's a certain duty you have to Caesar and to God. And, there's kind of that hierarchy there.
Right. I feel like also you have um, you and I are both sons of Christian Europe, and you through Poland and Ireland and Italy and et alia, and I through Ireland and Germany, and so like, and probably a little bit English in there, but I'm not really acknowledging that.
Yeah.
I have no proof. So, but it's like you and I are sons of Christian Europe, and it's a strange thing that because Christianity was so influential in society, so pervasive in society within Europe, we developed this idea of it being a European religion, which it really
Right.
isn't.
No.
Um,
It's
it's
from the Middle East. I
it's
mean,
a,
if
it's
we're
a
going to
really
play
it's a
that
Middle
game.
Eastern religion, but the
Yeah.
thing is that it's a Middle Eastern religion that, like, for the first time ever, the whole idea was go convert everybody.
Right.
Like
That was completely novel back then.
like at the time, you had conversion before that. Like you had like Ruth, for instance.
Yeah.
But it's like conversion en masse was like a totally new idea. The
Right.
idea
I
of
mean, the
no, we
Romans'
actually
whole
want people
thing.
in here. Like
Right. The Romans' whole thing was that we conquer you, and you can do your
yeah,
gods under
keep
our.
your little cult
Yeah.
that you have there, but it has to
Just
be
respect our
under our
guys.
umbrella. It
Right.
is a coexist, live and let live sort of thing, and the empire is going to be here to make sure that you guys don't kill each other because of your difference in cult.
Right,
Um,
and that's one of the reasons why the Christians didn't really like them because they didn't want to sacrifice to
right,
those other gods.
right, but it's a tricky thing um, because it is a Middle Eastern religion, but we all of a sudden have this idea of go and preach the gospel to all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the idea up to that point was that either you were part of a religion because of where you lived or because of who your ancestors were.
Hmm.
That was really it. Like by and large, that was it. Like even maybe it was a matter of like, oh well, either I'm from this land, but now I've come to this land and their gods are this, so I'm going to worship those gods. Those are the gods of this land, right?
Yeah,
It's like you didn't necessarily always take your religion with you. It's like, no, these are the gods of this land, these are the gods of this land, these are the gods of these peoples. And all of a sudden it's like, I am the God of the universe, and I want you to convert everybody, bring them into the fold, and you can all be equals among each other as sons and daughters of the Most High God. And so the disciples and like the apostles and all their followers start going out and preaching the gospel to all nations, and it starts rifling through Rome. It starts rifling through Asia Minor. It starts going through like all throughout Jerusalem. It's like, yeah, you have. It's going in all different directions. The difference is that if we're just talking, like, I'm going to ignore the Americas for now because, we have a good 1,500 years before that's really relevant. But it's like, if we're just looking at Asia, Africa, and Europe, also ignoring Australia, also ignoring New Zealand, I'm ignoring
most maps
a
do.
lot of places. I'm talking about like most of the landmass that controlled most of like world trade and stuff. That was most influential in world history. Was you had Asia, you had Europe, and you had Africa. Europe was the one that was we are all Christian at some point. Like
Yeah,
for a large portion of history, oh, we are all Christian. There are parts of Asia that are Christian, certainly, but not all of it. And then there are parts of Africa that are Christian, certainly, but not all of it. Like one of the earliest flourishing Christian civilizations was Ethiopia. Like it's like, yeah, no, we had pockets of Africa that were flourishingly Christian, but we didn't have a a Christian continent the way that we had it with Europe. And so
yeah,
that's why we tend to view it as like, oh, this is a European thing. Is not because it is a European thing, but just because the Europeans all agreed on that for a hot second. You know?
right.
And so, yeah, like when they brought over the European way of life was Christianity with some trappings. You know?
Hmm.
And so, like, that's going to be different than when you go to currently, we have hundreds of thousands of Christians being slaughtered in Africa, and that's because Africa has a long-standing tradition of sort of tribal warfare, and warlords and like our modern conception of maps is such a simplification. Like it is
Yeah,
here are the lines for most intents and purposes. Like
yeah,
there's a reason why when I say Africa, rather than saying Nigeria, rather than saying Kenya, rather than saying La Côte d'Ivoire. Like there's a reason why we say Africa a lot of the time is because most people in Africa just say Africa because our conception of, oh, and these are the lines of the Ivory Coast and these are the lines of South Africa and like these are the like a lot of that to the average person on that continent is a like, yeah, that's kind of just what the Europeans say our countries are.
Right. Yeah.
But really it is this is the land that guy controls right now, and this is the land that guy controls right now, and give it 10 years, those lines will be entirely different because these guys are constantly feuding.
Right.
And so if you were to take the if you were to say like, oh, we're imposing the African way of life on this new nation, it wouldn't mean the same thing as saying the European way of life. The European way of life was a little more congruent along certain lines. They had different
There's
traditions.
more of a
like,
unity there.
what's that?
More of a unity.
Yeah, there's more of a unity of, no, we all have the commonality of our worldview through Christianity. We have different trappings of how we go about our daily lives. We have different accoutrements to how we eat and dance and the music that we encourage or things like that, like different cultural things. But largely speaking, we all have that same basis. Whereas Africa has never had that across the board. Asia has never had that across the board. And so it's like, yeah, Europe was kind of functionally the first one to say like, yeah, and by and large, we're all Christian. And now you have a similar percentage over the last 500 years in Latin America. That yeah, there's this. Most of us are in some way Christian, if not Catholic. In the United States and Canada, we had a Christian culture because we were based on European culture. Now, ours is different from Europe in the sense that ours was a Protestant basis starting off. That, yeah, we were based on the English settlers and English common law and things like that. So it's like, yeah, we bring a certain Anglicanness with us. Not to say that there weren't areas that were owned by the French or the Spanish as well, but our country as the United States was the 13 colonies. 12 out of 13 are Protestant, you know? Maryland, baby. But,
for a bit until they got rid of that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like we had this basis of Christian culture within our society that was baked into the nation. And I think losing a sense of that tradition, of that handing down of things that have worked, which is what tradition is, has really been detrimental to society because now we view it as now you're trying to impose an old order on me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So maybe that's just something to leave for reflection. That, one, when somebody is trying to involve you in their tradition of faith or lifestyle, normally it's because they find it works really well for them. And so it tends to be a kind thing. But two, for all of us, I'm not just saying this as Catholics versus everybody else. For all of us, there are probably things that have been handed down to us that we have rejected because it seems like an imposition. But really, it is an invitation into something that has worked for centuries before us. That we're being invited into that same enabling thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Amen.
All right. Any final notes?
I think that's good.
All right. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
What was in the beginning, is now, and never shall be, world without end. Amen.
Amen. Go be holy, everybody.